Hanging up another Carrie Stevens streamer today. This is the Green Witch. Very, very simple pattern in terms of the streamer flies. The long feather wing streamers that she ties, basic body with silver tinsel and orange floss. Interesting thing is she has a number of witch patterns. There's a golden witch. There's also a fly called the witch, which is often referred to as the gray witch. All of them have a grizzly hackle wing, either dyed a yellow or dyed green in this case, or just a natural. This one has a couple of interesting techniques to it and some interesting components to the throat. I like the contrast in these, and I think it very handsome flying. It'd be a very productive streamer pattern. That's the Green Witch. I'll get started tying. Start the Green Witch with my hook in the vise. This is a Partridge CS15 in a size 4. Go ahead and debarb the hook. For thread, I'm starting out with a Wapsi. This is a UTC 140 Denier in white. The body on the Green Witch is a orange floss, so I don't want to darken that up. So I'm going to stick with a white thread to start out with. This will just help keep that floss from getting dark once it's in the water. And then I will switch over to the orange thread for the head, and then eventually a couple of black bands. I'll explain that as I get further along. I'm going to attach my thread about an eye length behind the eye of the hook. Just going to wrap down a base of thread. You don't have to do this in terms of nice, neat edge-to-edge wraps. If you don't want to, you can spread that out a little bit. I like to just keep that nice and smooth. If you're tying these as a fishing fly, certainly you don't have to be that fastidious. If you're going to tie these to frame and or to present to somebody for something, and put a little bit more care in, make certain that you have everything nice and smooth and it looks really nice. I'm going to stop maybe about 3/4 of the way down the hook shank, trim away the tag on that white thread. The Green Witch has no tail on it. It just has a silver tip to it as well as the body and then a silver rib. This allows me to, at this point, tie in the tinsel and then come back up and tie in the body, and then I can apply the tip and the rib all at the same time. For tinsel, I'm using a Danville. This is a silver and gold Mylar tinsel in a size 12. I'm just going to get maybe about a 10 or 12 inch piece here. I want to tie this in with the gold side up. And again, if you are tying these for presentation or for framing, you might want to let this extend all the length of the body. These are going to be mostly fishing flies, so I'm not as concerned. I'm going to wrap this down to just past the point of the hook and then wrap back up. This simply secures in the tinsel, nice flat area where the tag's going to go, and then I can tie in the body. The body, as I mentioned, is an orange floss. I'm using a Danville 4-strand Rayon in orange. This as well, if you don't want any bumps in the back end, then you can let this tag piece here go all the way the length of the body. Otherwise, you can pull that back a little bit Said for a fishing fly, I would not be that concerned. I would probably pull this all the way back to somewhere around the middle of the hook shank just to conserve a little bit of floss. Or a presentation fly, you might want to go ahead and extend that the length of the body just to keep it smooth. All I'm doing here is flattening out the thread a little bit just so that it wraps in a little bit smoother. And actually, it helps me get from one end of the hook shank to the other end a little bit quicker. That's why I'm using the 140 Denier thread here. You could use a 210 if you want even. I'm not worried about the larger thread bulking up the fly. The larger thread is simply used so that I can get from one end of the hook shank to the other a little bit quicker. Still doesn't seem all that quick because this is an awfully long hook shank. Just take your time with it. I'm stopping to flatten that thread out every now and again just to, again, keep that smooth, as well as it just helps me move along a little quicker. Before I get any further, I'm going to trim these back just a little bit. I want them just the length of the body. I don't want to get into that head space too much. I'm not hugely concerned about having perfect edge-to-edge wraps here. As you can see, most of that's covered pretty good, but I got a couple of gaps right there. That's fine. Floss is going to cover that up. So now I'm going to apply the floss body, and then after that I will apply the tag and then the rib. So with the body and the rib all in place, I will change over to my orange thread. The head on this Carrie Stevens green witch is orange with black, I should say black with an orange band. Problem is, if I try to use black and then put an orange band on it, the black will darken up the orange. So we get around that by using orange thread, and then the last step will be to put a couple of black bands in it in the front and the back. For thread, I'm using this is a Uni-Thread. Get this out here, Uni-Thread 8.0 in on orange. I'm going to bring this back to the back end of the head to tie in the belly of the fly. The belly is 4 to 6 strands of Peacock Herl. I'm using some strung Herl here and some white Bucktail. So I've got the Herl selected. I like the strung Herl because most of these are already tied in, stitched in, and so the tips are fairly even on these. It's easy to just reach in, grab 4 or 5 all at once and pull them out, and they're fairly even. They don't have to be just perfect. You can certainly fuss with them a little bit if you want to make certain that they're all the exact same length. I find that it's better off. I like it better anyway if they're not. I'm going to tie that in so it extends just maybe 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch or so behind the bend of the hook. I'm going to secure that in with a few wraps, and then I'll tie in the bucktail. The bucktail is clipped out. You want to try and get bucktail where the hairs are fairly, I don't want to say straight because none of it's straight, but some of it can be, the hair follicles themselves can be a little bit thicker and they're spongy. They have air pockets in them. So when you tie it in, it compresses and it flares out. You don't want that. And you want just, a slight wave to it so it's not real, doesn't have a lot of full body to it. This is mostly just going to, be flowing up under the underside here. To tie that in the same length as Peacock Herl. And we're going to tie in the throat. So the throat on the green witch is the same as the wing. It's a Grizzly dyed green. And I'll explain that in just a minute, what I'm using. But it also has some golden pheasant crest in it. So we're tying in some golden pheasant crest first. I have actually 2 feathers here, and I've stripped the fluff off the bottom already. The reason I'm using 2 is simply to give this a little bit more golden color, to make it a little fuller on this larger hook. If I was tying these on, say, 8s or even a shorter shank streamer hook or something, I might just use 1 just to give it that little hint of color. What I'm going to do, because I only need these to go about halfway down the hook shank, but I'm going to tie these in with that curve down. And I'm going to tie these in where I get that rachis. As you can see, I just grabbed that rachis in 2 or 3 wraps, bringing those right back on the underside here. And then I'm going to pull this to my right to bring it down to the length that I want. What that does is it collects all of these barbs off that rachis, and it collects them all together to maximize how many I'm using, and they're less likely to get pulled and torqued out on the side of the hook shank by doing it this way. I'm going to tie that in, secure it once I get the length that I want. I want that just about halfway down the hook shank. Again, you're not necessarily looking for, the beautiful curve in a lot of your classic salmon patterns and even wet flies. They go for the golden pheasant crest because you get that nice curve in it. As you can see, I have a little bit of one feather that is deciding it wants to go somewhere on its own. Sometimes you can scooch that around to help that. I'm just looking for the color. See, I have just a little bit of gold underneath that belly and everything, and it's going to be right underneath the green. So it just adds a little bit more color. That might be a little bit long, but we're going to go ahead and go with it. Now, as I've mentioned, the wing on this is made from some Grizzly Rooster saddles dyed green. And the throat is more or less the same. However, if you can find some schlappen feathers that are Grizzly schlappen dyed green, good for you. That'll probably work for you. But one thing that you can do is on these necks, or I should say saddles, this is the Grizzly dyed green saddle, the whiting saddle that I'm using. A lot of these feathers right here are small and the barbules are kind of short on some of those. But what you can do is on the underside here, these feathers up near the end here, the tail end, are very wide and broad, as you can see at the bottoms. So when you pluck these out, you have some very, very wide barbules right here that are really nice and webby. What you can do is you can trim off the fluff, a lot of the real fluff. If you want, you can keep a little bit of that fluff in there. I don't mind that in my streamers. But these give you some nice long barbs, very similar to schlappen, that you can peel off and you can tie in for your throat. So I've got 3 clumps ready here. I'm going to go ahead and tie these in, making these just about halfway down the hook shank, about as long as the golden pheasant. Just want to tie that right in on the underside. And then I'm going to tie another clump right on the 2 other sides. So with all those secured in and the excess trimmed away, I'm going to take a little time here to secure the butt ends of those and start shaping the head a little bit. Time to tie in the wings. What I need is a nice profile. I correct myself, not a profile. I need a nice platform for tying those wings in. So I'm tidying up the head space here so that I have that nice smooth platform just for that. So the wings are the Grizzly hackle dyed green. There's 2 of them for each side, and then there's a large jungle cock eye for the eye of the fly. I'm going to match those up. It's important that I get the tips mostly matched up here. If the front section here is a little off, that's fine. I can tie that in, but I do want to keep those tips nice and even. I'm going to trim away the excess so that I end up with just a small little handle on each wing to tie in. I'm going to tie mine in first just so that you can see it a little bit better when I tie this in. Try to make certain that it doesn't roll on you. Sometimes they want to kind of roll off that way away from you as you're wrapping those in. And then I'll tie in the other one on the other side. Take a moment to make certain that we have these both nice and vertical. You can scooch them around at this point a little bit. I just got that a little bit, so it's a little bit more vertical there. They're both going right down the sides of the hook shank. Pretty much just how we want it to be. So I'm going to cover up any materials, make certain there's no gaps in the thread wraps, shape the head here, and get this all nice and covered up with orange. Because as I said, what I'll do is I'll attach my black thread here. Take your time with this. Especially you want the middle section to be nice and covered. No underlying wing or anything like that, or throats poking through the thread wraps. Putting in about a 10-turn whip finish here, snugging that down. That is it for the orange thread. Now the black thread, I'm using a Danville 6/0 in black. And all I'm going to do here is reattach this. I'm going to put a little bit of wax on my thread to just give it a little bit more grip. It won't slide around as much, or as easily, I should say. And I'm going to just attach this to the back here. I want to be careful you don't make these bands too wide. Think of it in terms of dividing the head into thirds. Once you get that tag in secured, I can trim away the excess. And just be very careful with your thread placement so that we're just getting that back end covered. We don't want to build this up. Pick the other side. Remember, your whip finish here also can be used to finish that up with just a wrap or two of thread to cover things. And that is the band in the back of the head. Now I'm going to attach right behind the eye of the hook and do the same in the front. A little bit more wax. Get a few wraps in to secure the tag end of that thread, and then I can cut that away. Just don't go too far back, and then that orange band ends up being too narrow. Take your time with it. I find that this one is most difficult here because when you do the whip finish, you're not careful, the whip finish will slide forward. So I'm going to put a little bit more wax on my thread here. And a 5-turn whip finish here. Snug that down. And then trim away my thread. Like I said, sometimes that whip finish, when you do that and you snug it down and trim it away, it will slide off the front and it kind of pops off there. So put a little wax on there and just make certain you have good thread tension while you're doing it. And take a little care with it, and generally it'll be just fine. The white bits that you see, I think, are just a little bit of wax from the thread that will dissolve. That is the Green Witch. A little bit of head cement here. That will soak down in there and secure that. And I'll come back in a little bit here and put some clear lacquer on that to make that nice and secure, give it a little bit of a sheen, and the Green Witch will be complete. Interesting fly. I like the Grizzly hackle because I like the contrast in it, and I think it's a great asset to have in your baitfish imitations, having that contrast. So that is the Green Witch. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. But what's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.